Author Donna Jodhan presents Episode 12, Santa's Christmas Candle. Jamie Halstrum had been searching far and wide for something special to do at Christmas. He was not sure what that special something was, but it did not matter. He would find it. He walked the streets, visited the food banks, the senior homes, and the hospitals, and still he could not find what he was looking for. Then one day, about a month before the big day, it all came to him. He found what he was looking for, and with time running out, he somehow managed to pull it all off in grand style. Special persons came to his assistance, and on Christmas morning, a special gift awaited him. Santa's Christmas Candle, a tale of fiction with special gifts for special people. Written by Donna J. Jodhan.
Hello, 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 and ho, ho, ho to everyone. It's Detective DJ, and welcome to the final episode in my box set entitled The 12 Days of Christmas. Episode 12 is entitled Santa's Christmas Candle. I hope that everyone is enjoying their holidays thus far. So much to do before that big day. And we must not forget to write our letter to Santa Claus, because he's going to be looking to see who has been naughty and who has been nice. But I know right now you're all so very busy cooking and shopping and baking, running around and buying toys and games for all little girls and all little boys. That is, all those little girls and boys who have been so good throughout the year. Christmas is such a wonderful time, a time for gift wrapping, a time for giving, a time for greeting and meeting, a time for reconnecting with those family and friends who are so far away. But you know what? You can reach them so easily by Skype, on Facebook, through Twitter, via email, and the good old way of letter writing or even face-to-face, which I often prefer over everything else. But now it is time for us to enjoy the final episode in my Christmas box set, The 12 Days of Christmas. Before starting, however, I'd like to just recap the names of the previous 11 episodes that I recorded for you, and I sincerely hope that you have had at least a single moment to listen to at least one of these episodes. The first episode was entitled Santa's Super Secret. The second episode was entitled The President's Super Christmas Plane. Episode 3 was called Santa's Secret Toy Shop. The fourth episode was called Santa's Secret Christmas Ring. Episode 5 was called Santa's Super Christmas Party. Episode 6 was called Santa's Secret Sleigh Ride. 7 was called President's Super Christmas Ship. Episode 8 was called Santa's Christmas Midnight Mission. The 9th episode was called The President's Super Christmas Car. Number 10 was called Santa's Secret Suit. And 11 was called The President's Christmas Motorcycle. Now it is time for me to present you with the final episode Episode 12, Santa's Christmas Candle. I hope you enjoy this one and welcome aboard. Jamie Halstrum's Self-Examination. By all accounts, Jamie Halstrum had been a very successful man. He had grown up in a very warm and loving family, had attended some of the best schools, but then, as always, fate had decided to step into the picture. His family had lost everything in an unfortunate turn of events. When first his dad had gone bankrupt, and then Jamie's parents had both died due to illness. Then Jamie and his brother Justin had been left to wander the streets, homeless and penniless. Jamie was just 19, and his brother Justin was just a year younger. The brothers were very close and had always looked out for each other. And now more than ever, they were very close and both determined to survive. Jamie and Justin went to work in a pharmacy, and soon they were learning as much as they could, doing everything right, and in time Lady Luck had begun to smile down on them. Soon enough, they had become owners of a successful chain of pharmacies. They had literally gone from being two wandering young boys on the street to working in a pharmacy, to attending night school classes, and then using their skills to become owners of a very successful pharmacy chain. Their story would remind anyone of one that could be entitled From Rags to Riches. And the Halstrum brothers never forgot their humble beginnings after their parents had left them. Nor did they ever forget their parents and all of the good things that their parents had given to them and taught them. So many times had they done so, and especially at Christmas time, Jamie and Justin would take trips down memory lane to remember the days when they were kids and Santa Claus had been so good to them, bringing them lots of toys and goodies on his sleigh, and how their parents had gone to great lengths to make sure that theirs were wonderful Christmases. Then there were the years after their dad had gone bankrupt. They were just pre-teens then, and the family had had to sell everything and move into a very small apartment. But the Christmases were still very memorable, because if anything, their parents had continued to provide for them, no matter how small the presents had become, and how little the Christmas dinners had also become. The Halstrums had remained very close through thick and thin, so to speak, and the parents had always instilled in their boys an appreciation for whatever they had in life and to share with others who were less fortunate. Then Jamie's mom and dad had both become ill at the same time, putting the family into a whirlpool of confusion. And before the Halstrum brothers could fully prepare for what was to come, both parents had passed on as victims of cancer, dying practically within days of each other, leaving the brothers to look after each other. and they had indeed done so over the years. They would often reminisce about their Christmases over the years, how they had gone from ones with plenty around them, with two ones with very little to share and eat and drink, and to the very first one after they had lost their parents. Just Jamie and Justin in a cold little room with their little canary Chip, doing their best to keep warm and share a turkey TV dinner, and trying to be strong for each other and not being able to hide the tears. And they would comfort each other by saying things would get better when the new year came. And Jamie and Justin would remember well how that lovable little orange canary named Chip had sung his heart out during the day, as if he had understood that he needed to do so in order to cheer up the boys. And to some extent he had sure done this. And Jamie and Justin had rewarded him with tiny little slithers of apple and a bird bath of warm water. Then Lady Luck had decided to smile on the two young men, and sure enough, their Christmases had steadily continued to get better. From spending it alone in a cold small room with their canary Chip, to spending several of them in a comfortable house on the outskirts of the city, hosting Christmas parties for kids, dressing up as Santa Claus, and helping their pastor to hand out toys and hampers. The years had gone by, and the two brothers had remained very close, but neither of them had gotten married. And one day, Justin had surprised Jamie when he told him that he had decided to become a pastor. Jamie had naturally been very disappointed, but understood fully, and had supported his brother in his new venture. And the two brothers had continued to be very close. Jamie continued to be a very successful pharmaceutical owner, and his empire continued to grow steadily, while his brother Justin had flourished as a pastor, gaining a name for himself as a very good one, a loving one, and a caring one. The years had continued to be good to the brothers, but despite his success, Jamie had always felt that there was something missing in his life. No, not just his parents. No, not just the fact that he had always wished for a family of his own. And no, not that he did not have very many friends. He had always had this feeling, and as he grew older, this feeling continued to grow with him. Jamie and Justin Halstrum were alike in so many ways: hard-working, caring, and warm. But whereas Jamie was quite shy, it was the opposite for Justin. And when Jamie had first discussed his feeling of missing something in his life with his brother Justin, who was now a pastor, Justin had suggested that Jamie spend Christmas with him in his rectory, and that the two brothers take some time to discuss further. Jamie had welcomed the idea, and on Christmas Eve he had attended Christmas Mass at Justin's church, and had enjoyed listening to and participating in the proceedings of the Mass. He had particularly enjoyed listening to his brother Justin's homily, and along with the songs with the choir. And after the Mass, he had spent several quiet moments standing alone in front of the manger. And during the Christmas holidays, Justin had suggested to Jamie that he take some time to think about his future. And very early in the new year, Jamie had made a huge decision. He would take some time off from his company to look for what he felt was missing. And after putting his things in order and making sure that the business would go on, he did just that when he left his desk on the afternoon of an early February day. Jamie Halstrum's Faces and Places. Jamie was not very sure where he would start, let alone what he was looking for. But with support from his brother the pastor, he started his quest. Several years ago as a teen, he had had a brief experience, but as to what it was to be homeless and penniless, as he and Justin had spent a bit of time on the streets after their parents had died. Jamie's journey began on one of the coldest winter days in early February, and his first night was spent on the streets with other homeless people. He slept in ragged clothes under the cover of some cardboard and tattered blankets, and among some men who had drunk a bit too much that night. Jamie had come prepared, dressed in very ragged clothes, had started to grow a thick beard, and had even begun to grow his hair and leave it uncombed. For the next few weeks he repeated his actions every night and talked to several homeless people. He spoke to young men who had chosen to live on the street. He spoke to young mothers who had left their homes and families because of various pressures. He spoke to seniors who had nowhere to go because their families had either thrown them out or they had no family to go to. He spoke to business executives like himself, but they had lost their jobs, and one night one of them had even recognized him. But Jamie had managed to convince the man that he was not who he thought he was. At first the man was not totally convinced, but Jamie had won out in the end. And after a few weeks, Jamie had checked in with his brother Justin, and the two had discussed Jamie's experiences. Now Jamie was on to something new. He was about to embark on a journey among the kids, and he was looking forward to this portion of his adventure with great anticipation. In the coming weeks, Jamie visited and volunteered at several hospitals for kids who were sick. He met so many sick little girls and boys and interacted very closely with them. He chatted with them, he listened to them, he played with them. And on so many occasions, Jamie cried with them. Jamie met so many terminally ill kids, and those from broken homes. He met kids with diseases, and kids with disabilities, and at times he wished that he could just take them all back to his home. And he had even toyed with the idea of adopting 2 of them. A little brother and sister from Eastern Europe who were both blind and who had lost their parents during wartime and who were now in America, and parents were being sought for them. Jamie had especially been taken by the little brother and sister. The little sister Era was just 5, and her brother Marius was 3. And Jamie marveled at how little Era would guide her brother around, because Era had more sight than Marius. And he had told his brother Justin about these 2 kids, and Justin had listened attentively, just smiling to himself. Era and Marius had reminded Jamie of little china dolls, with permanent smiles on their faces, a sunny disposition despite their terrible losses, and constantly looking out for each other, just like how he and Justin used to look out for each other when they were younger, and were still doing today. And then Jamie had left them behind to move on to the next phase of his search. He next traveled to food banks where he became a regular helper, serving food to those who came for assistance, and he also served at soup kitchens and homeless shelters. Jamie enjoyed each of his experiences, but on a quiet night when he was alone, sleeping on a narrow bed with a thin blanket for cover, he would sometimes think of little Era and her brother Marius, and he would see their faces and hear their laughs, and how he wished he could make them his own. Then it was off to volunteer at homes for seniors and hospices for the terminally ill, and then to homes for veterans, and then finally to halfway homes for youths. And by the time fall had rolled around, Christmas was again not too far away. Jamie had finished his soul searching, and now it was time for him to go home and think seriously. The long cold nights spent on the streets, and the long hours spent volunteering at the hospices and hospitals, and at food banks and soup kitchens were now over for Jamie, and it was time to find what was missing. Jamie Halstrum's aha moment. And now it was November, and Jamie had been back home for almost 2 weeks. And whereas he had hoped that his search for that something that was missing would bring him what was missing, he soon found out that there was more work for him to do before he made his discovery. November was speeding along like a freight train, and Jamie was still soul-searching. He continued to have long chats with his pastor brother Justin, and Justin had continued to urge him to be patient. Justin would tell him not to worry. It will all work out. You'll see. And then Jamie had decided to do something just that bit different. He did not think that he had anything to lose, It would not hurt anyone. And besides, he was going to do something that as a child he had always enjoyed doing before Christmas. And it had become a special tradition for him and his brother Justin. Yes, something very simple, but it could help him to clarify things in his mind. And as he sat in his study on a very cold November afternoon, he reached for the receiver to his phone and removed it from its cradle. Then he shut off his iPhone and his computer, and then he took out his pen and a scratch pad and got to work. And in his very neat and careful handwriting, Jamie wrote the following: Dear Santa, it has been a very interesting year for me, and I hope that I have been a good boy. This time I am not asking for any toys or anything like that. No, I'm asking for something else. I don't think I would be too old to write to you, so I hope you read my letter. This past year I went searching for something which I believe has been missing in my life. But alas, I am not sure if I have found it. So now I am writing to you to ask for your help. Help me to find it. Hopefully you can help me find it in time for Christmas. I hope that the weather is not too bad for you when you travel with your reindeer this Christmas Eve. I wish you and Mrs. Claus a very Merry Christmas. Hoping to hear from you soon, Jamie. Then, with a childish smile on his face, Jamie did sign the letter, and as an afterthought he placed it in a white envelope and addressed it to Santa Claus, care of the North Pole. Then the postal code was Ho, Ho, Ho. And what the heck? Jamie had then sealed the envelope, placed a stamp on it, put his return address on it, and then walked to a nearby mailbox and had dropped it in. Nothing to it, no harm done to anyone, just living out a childhood tradition. And when the post office saw it, they would probably put it into the ever-growing pile of letters to Santa Claus, and then promptly forget all about it. They would never know that it was from a grown man. Jamie savored the cool Christmas air as he walked slowly home that late afternoon, passing kids playing on the quiet street, and men and women returning home from work in their cars. He waved to a few of his neighbors as they passed by, and then he stopped at a burger joint and bought himself a large burger along with fries and a large Coke. Then, with bag in hand, he ambled up his driveway, unlocked his door, and turned off his alarm. And waiting for him, as always, was his faithful dog, a large dog, a beautiful retriever called Nike. The dog had heard the key turning in the front door, and he knew instantly that his master was home. He greeted his master with his all too familiar leaps and barks, and after Jamie had fed Nike and eaten his own supper, master and dog had settled down for the evening to watch a bit of TV and read before retiring for the night. Jamie's snow encounter. December was now here, and Jamie was still waiting to discover what was missing in his life. Sometimes he would worry about it, but then again, Christmas was fast approaching, and it was one of his favorite times of the year. December saw Jamie preparing for his home for the holiday season. He busied himself with decorating his 7-foot pine tree with decorations that he had managed to save from way back when he was just a kid. Jamie and Justin had managed to save their childhood decorations from the hands of the creditors when his dad had been forced to go bankrupt. And his parents had been touched that the two little boys had thought to do this. They were hand-painted ornaments ranging from bells to angels and stars. There were miniature sleighs and figures on skis and skates. There were seals with colored balls on their noses, and music boxes with hand-painted fairies on their covers. There were little girls and boys holding balloons, and there were tiny china dolls wearing delicate slippers and shoes, and ballerinas dressed in all kinds of costumes, and painted candy canes and candles, and Santas and Mrs. Clauses, and of course, the huge shining star, which Jamie took extra care when placing at the very top of the tree. Jamie's parents could never really figure out how their two little boys had managed to hide these precious heirlooms from the big bad creditors. But they had indeed managed to do it. Taking the carefully packed boxes one evening from the family's attic, one by one, and then sneaking downstairs to their laundry room. They had carefully hidden some of the boxes under huge piles of dirty laundry, and the others they had hidden in their garage behind some wooden boxes under piles and piles of old newspapers. A very ingenious trick for two little boys. Then, when the family was getting ready to move into their small apartment, the boys begged their parents to let them bring the boxes along. Their parents could not refuse. After the boys had begun to beg and cry, for the boys had been good little boys to their parents, and they had never asked for too many things. Jamie had always enjoyed decorating his home for Christmas, and his brother Justin would always make time to come over and help. This was one of Justin's busiest times of the year, but he would always make time for his older brother. And the final decorative piece that the brothers had assembled and placed in the living room was a gigantic train set that their parents had given to them, their last Christmas present to their teenage boys before they had died. And the train set had been one that their parents had bought with some of their final set of savings, leaving it in the safekeeping of a family friend to give to their sons after they had passed on. because they knew how much both of their sons had loved train sets. And the family friend had kept it safely for them while they were in the process of finding their feet after their parents had passed on. And they had given it to their brothers as soon as they had had room for it. Both Jamie and Justin were absolutely blown away when the family friend had given it to them. And they had cried openly when they had opened the gigantic box and had discovered what it was. Their parents had remembered their love for train sets, and now the boys had vowed to always keep it safe, bringing it out at Christmas time and then carefully repacking it after the holiday season. And the train set was one that contained every detail: tracks, trains, stations, and figures. All of the carriages were there. Engineers and train drivers, passengers and conductors, ticket agents holding miniature tickets, train stations with miniature ticket counters. At the press of a button on the remote, the trains began to move, and they would automatically stop at the train stations that had to be assembled and placed along the wide expanse of tracks. As the trains moved, their horns would toot, and at crossings in the track, they would automatically slow down, and their horns would toot even louder. And there were gates that automatically moved up and down at the crossings to signal the oncoming trains. There were lights that flashed at the crossings, and when the train stopped at the station, a button on the remote could be pressed to open the doors, and the passengers would alight and move towards the platform. And there was a Big Ben clock displayed at the top of the main station. Each Christmas, this immaculate train set had always been the centerpiece at Jamie's home, and friends and their youngsters had always marveled at its magnitude. And the talk was always, where did Jamie's and Justin's parents buy this unusual piece? No one could come up with an answer, but the brothers had always suspected that maybe it was their dad who had put it all together, as he had been an engineer and had loved to tinker with electronics. And after they had finished their decorating on this particular night, Justin had decided to sleep over, and lights had gone out at around midnight, and Jamie had fallen into a deep sleep after jumping into bed. And certainly he had dreamed, and what a dream it was. The snow was falling very heavily, and a terrific snowstorm was in progress. But Jamie had decided to take a walk in the snow, and as he walked the streets in the middle of this terrific snowstorm, he realized that practically no one was around. Just him walking on an almost empty street. There were lots of cars. Some were stuck in huge snowbanks at the side of the street, while others had seemed to be abandoned in the middle of the street. And as Jamie walked, the snow continued to fall harder, making it difficult for him to walk, let alone see too far ahead. but he knew this street like the back of his hands, and was confident that he would not get lost. Then Jamie was standing on the corner of his street, looking up at the fat snowflakes chasing each other as they came down. And soon he realized that there was someone else nearby. At first he could not make out much, but then he saw him. For standing in front of him, about 3 feet away, was a man holding 2 small babies. The man was dressed all in white, and Jamie had immediately thought that he looked just like an angel, because he was wearing a golden crown, and his white robe bore golden braids. Jamie had had difficulty seeing him, because his white robe was the same color as the falling snow, but it was his headpiece that had given him away, and he was smiling broadly, and then he was holding out the babies to Jamie, one wrapped in a blue blanket and the other in a pink blanket. At first Jamie had hesitated, but when the man had continued to persist, he had gingerly reached out and had taken the babies, and before he knew it, the man had disappeared. Jamie had been left holding the sleeping infants. What should he do? Jamie's Christmas candles. And it was at this point that Jamie had woken up, and it was already morning, and when he had clambered out of bed and had gone looking for Justin, he found his brother up and already making breakfast for them. Jamie did not tell Justin about his dream, choosing to keep it to himself for the time being. That day he kept thinking about the dream, but by dinner that evening he had already put it out of his mind. And in the coming days he was kept busy helping Justin with various tasks and activities at Justin's church. Christmas was well on the way. Parties to plan and host for kids, toys and goodies to hand out to families, seniors' homes to visit, and so much more. Jamie was a busy man, and oh, how he loved every moment of it all. Christmas, Christmas, and Jamie even took some of the youngsters caroling. This was his favorite time of the year, and for this year he had decided to do something new. He had decided to give away some of his own handmade candles, as in recent times he had learned how to make his own candles, and he had made several really pretty ones, in different shapes and colors, and adorned in different styles. He had made several Christmas candles, and now he had decided to hand them out, calling them Jamie's Christmas candles. He had labeled them, or some of them, as candles of hope, others as candles of joy, and still others as candles of good fortune, and they were well received by everyone, neighbors as well as parishioners. There were candles in the shape of angels, candles in the shape of snowmen, candles in the shape of Santa and Mrs. Claus, fairy candles and ballerina candles. Then it was Christmas Eve, and time for Christmas Mass, and Jamie had gone to Justin's church to celebrate it all. He had sat in one of the front pews and had participated fully in the ceremonies. And oh, how much he had enjoyed this Mass. But it was always at Christmas Mass that both brothers would remember their parents, who had passed on so many years ago. For Mr. and Mrs. Halstrum had both died close to Christmas, and the brothers would always remember their first Christmas Mass without their parents. A very cold Christmas Eve, as these two very brave young men had entered their church, and many of their fellow churchgoers had stopped to sympathize with them. And they had sat next to each other in the pew, heads bowed, and the tears streaming down their faces, and they were doing their best to hide their tears. The young men were all alone in the world now. Except for one or two family friends, all that they had now were each other. And Jamie would remember how he had gone to pray in front of the manger. And he had done this after Mass, asking the baby Jesus to give him and Justin the strength to carry on. And Jamie would remember how sad Justin looked on that fateful Christmas Eve night so many years ago, and how he had come to stand next to him at the manger. Then both boys had knelt in front of the manger and had stayed there for a very long time, heads bowed and praying for strength, and how they had then returned home to their tiny one-room apartment, and they had each taken out their Christmas candle given to them by their mom just before she had passed on. And together she and her sons had called the candles Santa's Christmas candle. Mrs. Halstrum had died a few hours after giving these candles to her sons, their dad having died a few days earlier, and now their world would change forever. That was then, and this was now. And now Mass was over, and after spending some time with Justin, Jamie had driven home as the snow was falling lightly and the cold Christmas wind was blowing gently. Jamie had decided to stay up for a bit, and as he had sat in his living room sipping warm apple cider and admiring his train set and his decorations, the huge Christmas tree and his new toy, a new laptop with all of the bells and whistles, he had switched on the TV and had turned it low as he lay dozing on his couch. He did not notice as his dog Nike had come into the room and had climbed up next to him, and soon enough dog and master were fast asleep. Jamie was not too sure how long he had slept, but he had been awakened by Nike, who was barking and pawing at his beard. The sleepy Jamie had started to rub his eyes and was just putting out his hand to quiet Nike when he realized that his doorbell was ringing. Jamie realized that it was only a little after 7 a.m. when he glanced up at the clock on his mantel. Who could it be ringing his doorbell so early on Christmas morning? Maybe if he ignored it, the person would go away. But then it probably was not Justin, his brother, because Justin usually slept in a bit later on Christmas morning. So then who? Jamie soon found out that he could not ignore the persistent ringing of the doorbell. And in addition, Nike would not let him ignore it, as he kept on barking, with the barks growing louder by the minute. The Christmas morning visitors. Jamie got slowly out of bed, and with Nike at his heels, he put on his dressing gown and walked to the door. He opened it slowly, and the first thing he saw was his brother Justin, standing there dressed in a heavy light blue parka, with a broad smile on his face. Justin's blonde hair was neatly combed, but slightly unruffled on the top by the wind. This was not usual, to see Justin out this early on Christmas morning, and Jamie was a bit puzzled. But as he went to open his mouth to speak, Justin had put a finger to his lips, and Jamie had remained silent. And then Nike had somehow managed to sneak by Jamie and had started to greet Justin, but then he had stopped suddenly. And as Jamie watched, Nike's head and ears had gone up suddenly. Then slowly but surely his tail had begun to wag, but Jamie could not see what his dog was looking at. Then Nike had done something a bit different. He had started to circle around Justin, sniffing at the cold ground as he went. Nike had then started to wag his tail once more, and soon he had become extremely excited. And during this time, Justin had simply stood there, smiling up at his brother. And when Jamie reminded him that he needed to come in because it was quite cold out there, Justin did just that. Not before, though, he had turned and signaled to someone beside him. Someone that Jamie had not seen until now. And the lady had come forward leading 2 young kids by the hand. And the very confused Jamie had let them all in to his house, shutting the door behind him, and almost forgetting to let Nike back in as well. And in the aftermath, Justin had explained everything to his older brother. The young lady's name was Melissa Marconi, someone who Justin had met about 6 months ago, and he had been seeing her since then. She was one of Justin's parishioners, and at first sight she had reminded Jamie very much of their mom. Justin had kept this friendship from his older brother because he had wanted to see where it would go. And now he was telling Jamie that he and Melissa were planning to get married. Not before he got his older brother's blessing, however. And Jamie readily gave his blessing. Then it was time for the other shoe to drop, so to speak. And Justin introduced his 2 little visitors to Jamie, who he recognized at once. Era and Marius, whom Jamie had met several months ago and had told Justin about them. Justin had listened intently as Jamie had related tales about Era's and Marius's adventures, telling him how much he wished he could adopt them. and unknown to his brother, Justin had decided to do something for his older brother, because he honestly felt that Jamie deserved to have these two little gems. And in his capacity as a pastor, he had managed to make things happen relatively quickly. And now Ara and Marius could be his, and all he had to do was to sign the papers. Jamie was speechless. He looked from Justin to Melissa, who had also been in on the plan, as Melissa was a social worker. It did not take long for a joyous Jamie to make up his mind. Ara and Marius had been sitting quietly while all of this was going on, and now the two little ones had become the center of attention. This Christmas Day would go down in the history as the happiest ones for Jamie and Justin Halstrum. For whereas a few short hours ago it was just Jamie and Justin Halstrum, the family had suddenly grown to include Melissa, Ara, and Marius. And even Nike gave his approval. This is the end of episode 12, Santa's Christmas Candle. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed writing it and recording it for you. And I hope too that you enjoy the other episodes of my box set entitled The 12 Days of Christmas. I want to wish each and every one of you a very, very Merry Christmas. A toast to you for the New Year. Happy Holidays, Joyeux Noël, Feliz Navidad, Buen Natale, Happy Hanukkah. And please do not forget to write your letters to Santa Claus. Above all, folks, remember this. It is not the things you do at Christmas time that matters, but it is the things you do all year through. And it is a song that I shall always remember, that has been sung year after year by Bing Crosby, long after his passing. You guys take care, be good to each other, be good to yourselves. Ho, 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 and see you again very, very soon. Bye for now.